You know, the strange thing about understanding is that information actually often destroys it. Most people think learning automatically makes them smarter. But maybe that isn't what learning does at all. Because there's a massive difference between just carrying around answers and carrying actual clarity. And that difference, it literally changes everything. We live in a world that completely assumes speed equals intelligence, right? We assume that if a machine processes billions of parameters in a millisecond, it must be incredibly wise. We convince ourselves that complexity equals depth. But intelligence isn't found just by stockpiling data. True intelligence is the quiet, deliberate act of deciding what actually matters. It's the weights. Think of a weight like the attention you give to a whisper in a crowded, noisy room. The data, that's every single sound around you. The clinking glasses, the footsteps, the loud arguments. The weight is your ability to ignore all that noise and hear the one voice that matters. True intelligence is focus. Section 1. The illusion of speed. Let's imagine a quiet room where a mentor and a student are talking. The student, let's call him Arjun, is a curious learner, but he looks totally exhausted. He looks at his mentor, Dev, and confesses, "I feel completely overwhelmed. The pace of AI, it's just too fast. I don't think I'm confused. I think I just know too much and understand way too little." Dev just smiles. He sees right through this fog of information. He points out that there are really two ways to approach this new world. There's the script monkey, he explains, who chases the illusion of speed. They just memorize syntax. They treat the system like this magical black box that grants wishes, totally driven by ego and the desire for super fast answers. And then, Dev says quietly, there's the alchemist. The alchemist doesn't care about the magic trick at all. They care about depth. They understand first principles. They understand entropy. You know, the natural tendency of any system, including our own minds, to descend into chaos and disorder unless we apply focused effort to actually organize it. The alchemist values the slow, disciplined search for truth way more than the hollow victory of speed. Section 2. The black box trap. At first glance, all of this sounds pretty obvious, right? Until you look closer. Another builder, an analytical thinker named Mira, joins their conversation. She notices Arjun staring blankly at his screen, totally intimidated by what he assumes is some all-knowing superintelligence. AI is not magic, Mira tells him firmly. It's not wisdom, and it's definitely not automatically truthful. She writes down a single, grounding definition for him. A model is not an oracle. It doesn't actually know reality. A model is just a disciplined guess. Just think about the profound humility of that idea for a second. A guess isn't an absolute fact. It's a probability. It's an approximation of the world based on the past. And because it's a guess, it has to be trained. It has to be tested. And most importantly, it must be constantly evaluated by human intuition. Your intuition. The moment we forget that it's just guessing, we surrender our own agency to a machine that doesn't actually understand what it means to be alive. You are not an AI. Your understanding of reality is the ultimate anchor. So, how do you teach a machine what a sunrise is? Well, you can't. A machine doesn't feel the warmth on its skin or see the hope in the morning sky. But what you can do is measure the intensity of the light. You can capture the exact hex code of those orange pixels. You can plot the angle of the sun above the horizon. The very moment we represent our continuous, messy, poetic reality as numbers, we can actually begin to see structure. And this is where artificial intelligence really begins. Now it's a magical spark in a massive server farm, but with organization. We literally take the sprawling chaos of human existence, the exact time you wake up, the song you skip, the words you type, and we slice it all into precise numerical measurements. Once reality becomes just a grid of numbers, the machine can finally start searching for the patterns beneath it. This is how that mysterious black box is completely dismantled. It's not a ghost. It's a foundation built on clear, fundamental mathematical components. Think of it kind of like baking. Vectors are simply lists of features, like the exact ingredients of a recipe. Matrices are the ovens. They're the mathematical engines that transform those raw ingredients into something completely new, changing their shape and their meaning. And probabilities? Well, they're the taste test at the end. They measure the uncertainty of the result, basically asking, hey, how likely is it that this is a cake and not a loaf of bread? When you really understand this math, the ingredients, the ovens, and the taste tests, the terrifying complexity of artificial intelligence becomes nothing more than a very tall, very fast, very organized filing cabinet. It isn't magic. It's just structured mathematics. Section 3. Anatomy of an agent. But here's the really strange part. What exactly happens when we take these passive mathematical structures and we give them the power to act? We cross this massive boundary from a tool that just answers questions into an agent that actually does things. Dev draws a super simple circle on a piece of paper. He tells Arjun, an agent is not a creature. It doesn't have a soul or intent or desires. It is literally just a humble circle. Think of it like the autopilot in an airplane. It observes the altitude. It plans a micro-adjustment. It uses a tool, the wing flaps. And then it reviews the new altitude. Observe, plan, act, review. This is the loop of responsibility. When you see an agent simply as a mechanical loop, you stop fearing it as some kind of master, and you start governing it as an assistant. Now, a specialist agent requires a very clear job and absolute unbreakable perimeters. For instance, if you build an agent to check legal evidence, well, that is its strict boundary. It owns the evidence-checking process. It might support another specialized agent that's drafting a document, but there are hard lines it must never, ever cross. The final gavel? That high-risk business decision to actually take a client to court? That must never be automated. That remains forever human. Intelligence can process the data, and sure, it can try to persuade you, but human authority must be the one to carry the weight of the decision. Because at the end of the day, an algorithm cannot be held accountable. You are not an AI. You bear the consequences of the actions, so you must always hold the reins. Section 4, the intelligence loop. Which raises a really fascinating question. If intelligence isn't just a magical component you can go out and buy and plug into something, what exactly is it? It's this exact continuous sequence: perception, representation, reasoning, action, and feedback. Think of a simple smart thermostat or even a self-driving car adjusting to heavy traffic. It perceives the cold room. It represents that data internally as a temperature drop. It reasons that the heater should turn on. It takes the action. And crucially, it receives feedback when the room actually warms up. Intelligence lives entirely right here in this flow, from perceiving a signal to adapting based on the result. If you break this flow, the intelligence instantly degrades. An AI system without a human feedback loop isn't learning. It's just repeating its own rigid assumptions alone in the dark. Intelligence, Dev says softly, emerges from coordination. And this is exactly why so many modern AI deployments completely fail when they hit the real world. They act incredibly quickly, but they lack your human feedback loop. Speed without care actually destroys learning. If you sprint through a thick, heavy fog without a map, you aren't being efficient. You're just going to hit a brick wall a lot faster. An AI system that acts at lightning speed but is totally disconnected from human correction will inevitably drift into error. Speed simply shows you what's technically possible in a millisecond, but slow, deliberate depth determines what is actually sustainable in reality. Section 5. The slow mind advantage. Reality, however, has other plans. Our world right now constantly celebrates the fast, the immediate, the instant answer. But true understanding is built so differently. And this brings us to the core realization of why human slowness and careful, deliberate architecture are actually the true engines of intelligence. Shallow speed produces brittle, dangerous knowledge. It leads to silent failures and highly confident hallucinations. And what exactly is a hallucination? It's a system that lies to you with absolute, terrifying confidence simply because it lacks a fundamental anchor to the truth. Slow depth, on the other hand, builds transferable understanding. It's the steady progress of first principles thinking that compounds into resilient mastery over time. The slow learner notices the actual load-bearing structures of the world, where others only memorize the glossy, fragile surface. And this leads us to what we could call a layman's algorithm for life in an intelligent age. Observe reality directly, without hiding behind screens or borrowed opinions. Choose your next honest action. Act small enough so that if you do fail, the failure is just useful data, not a total disaster. Measure the results without ego, repair what breaks, and teach what helped. This isn't just an algorithm to program machines. This is a steady, unwavering compass for you, a guide to keep you grounded when tools and technologies are shifting violently around us. Remember, you are not the machine. You are the architect of the weights. Dev looks at Arjun. The room has gone perfectly quiet. When you say you understand something, Dev asks gently, what exactly survives if we remove all the words? Perhaps intelligence was never really about having better answers. Perhaps it was always about asking better questions. And maybe understanding was never something to collect, only something to notice.